Jenny, thanks so much for spending some time with me. I'm excited to
Thanks.
have you on the show.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jenny, as we've talked before, we talked a little bit about some of the losses that you have had. And so I just wanted to open it up and just ask you, a little bit about your journey, about some of these significant losses. And so you just share as much or as little as you want and what you feel comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah. Um, for the most part, growing up, I didn't lose anyone close to me until I was in my 20s. Like as far as like close family member, my grandpa passed away when I was 21. And so I had both sets of my grandparents on my mom's side and my dad's side until adulthood. So in when I vision my adulthood and my life, my parents were a big part of that. And life happens, and life as we know it, we can't have expectations, and we just never know when our time's going to come. And I lost my mom when she was 52. She passed away from breast cancer. So I was 29 at the time. And it happened very fast. Like she hid her illness from us, I think, because she was scared. And she didn't get medical help until it was too late. So she was diagnosed with breast cancer in October, and she passed away in February.
Wow, that is
And
fast.
yes, but with her passing, we knew it was coming. Like she ended up in intensive care. We knew that she wasn't going to recover. So we were able to have a lot of closure and beginning to process that and beginning to think about life without my brother and I to think about life without our mom. And when she passed away, it was very different from when my dad passed away. So
Mm.
my dad passed away 6 years later from a massive heart attack. And his heart attack was a result of kidney failure from unmanaged type 2 diabetes. So one day he was there. He lived probably like less than a mile from me. I was at his house, and the next day I got the call that he was at the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, the doctor said, "We're sorry to inform you your dad had passed."
Oh,
That loss was so hard.
yeah.
Like when I think about it, I still get all emotional, obviously, like it's my dad. But when I think about the two, cancer is horrible to watch your loved one suffer, but it's an opportunity to say goodbye.
Yeah,
It's an opportunity.
it's the anticipatory grief, right? We
Mm-hmm.
know that they're going to pass away, but like you said, you have this opportunity to say everything that you need to say and spend that time with them. And the sudden losses, they're just
Mm-hmm.
here one moment and gone. There's
Yeah,
no, you don't get to say goodbye.
right.
And
Yeah.
it's so I mean, it's all traumatic.
Yes.
But so your dad passed away 6 years after your mom, but
Mm-hmm.
you were young. I mean, that means that you were what, 36 or
I
so?
was 36 when my dad passed because I remember crying to my husband thinking, because I envisioned myself living a long time.
Yeah.
And I told my husband, I'm like, that is such a long time without my dad. When my mom passed, I wasn't married yet. I didn't have my kids. And when my dad passed away, I had both of my kids, and my son was only 5 months old.
Wow.
Um, so I just, it just hit me that, wow, like, and growing up, like with my experience and having my grandparents, I just assumed they would be around. They would be around to be a part of my kids' lives. Like
Yeah.
they would be around to help me and support me. So when they both passed away, it was like, what? And then you feel like an orphan no matter how old you are. But I always try to see the positive in I had them for my growing up, my early stages of my adult life. And they're still a big part of my life, just in a different way. So I like to look at that positive, because I know there's some people who lose their parents much younger and they don't have them for their childhood, and that's hard too. If my dad would have passed away in his 80s, I think it would have been just as hard. Or my
Yeah.
mom passed away in her 80s, it would be just as hard. Um, so yeah, it was tough for me to think about raising my kids without my parents.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is just another part of the grieving process, right? Because your children will not physically know their grandparents, although I'm
Hmm.
sure you talk about them all the time. But
Yeah.
when my grandfather passed away. My mom's dad passed away when my brother was 3 months old. So he died before I was ever born, and he died of a heart attack. And it was the sudden loss. My mom was 21.
Okay.
And I remember my mom and dad always talking about how much my grandpa would love me and how much I would love my grandpa. And I always thought, my brother and I always thought we got really robbed of not having grandparents. So I imagine from the grandchild side as well, just going, wow, I just really wish I would have known him. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and you said being an orphan. I remember I was 48 when by the time both my parents passed away, and I still feel like that was young. And I remember
Hmm.
saying out loud, like, "Oh my God, I'm an orphan." And
Yeah.
there's this sense of loss that I think, we think, right? Like we're supposed to bury our parents.
Hmm.
Parents aren't supposed to bury children. It's not the
Right.
way it should be. The way it should
Yes.
just go is that we bury our parents. And yet, while that can make logical sense to us, I mean, they are our parents. And if you have a good relationship with your parents and you love your parents like that,
Yeah.
then it still, I think we shouldn't minimize the loss of our DNA, of our the people who created us, right? There's such an enormous loss.
Yes.
So
Mm.
I mean, how did you process it? You said that it's quite different experiences. Like with your mom, how did you kind of process the loss at that time?
Yeah. So my husband and I at the time actually started dating again around that time. And I considered that a lifesaver for me. He really provided me a lot of comfort, and um, just really enjoyed his company and his support during that time. My friends, my family, like my mom's brother was just a huge part of helping me not get over, but get through that whole process. Like, you have to plan the funeral, and my parents weren't married at the time. So it fell on me, and my younger brother, emotionally wasn't in a position to handle it. So being the older child, and it just fell on me, and my mom's brother kind of took the reins for me,
Wow.
and thank goodness. And so when my dad passed away, because it was so sudden, I physically was sick, like
Mm,
physically sick. I couldn't eat. I was always on the bathroom, like
wow.
physically it tore me apart, and I was having to try to keep it together because I was nursing my 5-month-old. And my husband stepped in, and he took control, not control, but he took care of it all for
Yeah.
me. He went
Oh,
to the mortuary, he booked all the appointments, he went through all my dad's stuff, because I physically could not do it. I
wow.
couldn't.
It's so important to have that support and just
Hmm.
stepping in and it
Yeah,
is taking control of this situation, because
right.
I'm
It's
assuming it
so
just feels
fast.
so out of control,
Yeah,
right?
and the hospital's like, where do you want us to transport the body? What do you want us to do with this? And then everyone's calling you to donate organs, and you're just not,
Wow.
uh, you don't even want to think about that.
Yeah. You're
Like,
it.
yesterday they were alive, and now I'm contemplating you guys don't taking their organs. Like, it was hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that was really what kind of triggered my husband and I to develop a living trust, because
Yeah.
both of my parents didn't have one. So we didn't realize, And I don't think my parents realized either, right? They probably thought they had all the time in the world to take care of that. Um, and we just never know. And my husband having to go through the process with my dad, and I having to go through the process with my mom. I just knew like we didn't want our kids to have to deal with any of that with probate or
Yep.
making decisions and do they want to be cremated or do they want to be buried or all those things. It's now in our trust, clearly
Yes.
defined.
Exactly. Yes, it's so important. I live in the UK and I worked for lawyers, and they did wills and probate, and they did trusts, and I remember seeing the ones who had everything in order. They, not that they weren't, what it did is it relieved them from some of these other things, and they were able to grieve a little bit quicker in a sense,
Hmm.
because they weren't
Yeah.
overloaded with all this
Yeah.
paperwork and all these decisions. It was all there. And then I saw the nightmare of it on
Yeah.
the flip side of people who weren't organized. So I said to my parents, right, here's what you need to do. Put my brother on your bank account because he's in Seattle.
Yeah.
He lives near them.
Yeah.
Executors, we need this, we need lasting powers of attorney. And they had everything set
Yeah.
up. So
Good.
when they passed, it was very clear on what we were going to do. And,
Yeah.
so, right. And so you have this amazing support system, husband, friends, family. Did you, with mom or dad, did you do anything else outside? Where you do therapy or?
Oh, yeah. I did therapy with both. And I actually happened to be in therapy when my dad passed. I don't know if I was dealing with postpartum. I don't think it was depression, but I was dealing with anxieties. And yeah, that's like my whole health journey. That's what really led me to what I'm doing now with my health. But I just thank God that I already had her set up. Like I was already going to her. I already had a relationship with her. She was the first person I called.
Yeah.
And well, I shouldn't say the first, after my family, she was the first person I
Yes.
called. And I said, my dad passed away. And she said, oh, Jen, like you have to make sure, because she knew I had a brand new baby. I mean, 5 months, brand new, nursing him. She goes, you have to take care of yourself. Make sure you're eating, make sure you're drinking. And I remember my girlfriend coming over. And my dad was very well loved. Like people loved him. So, and that was comforting to have people reach out and tell me how much he meant to them. Same with my mom, too. I think I talk about my dad mostly just because it was recent and he was a big part of my kid's life until he passed. Um, my girlfriend came over and she brought like cake.
Yeah.
Normally I would have dug into it and I could not stomach it. I said, I just can't eat it. Like my body just went into like a shock. So
Yeah.
physically, I really tried to listen to what my therapist was saying, take care of yourself. And I honestly do feel so like when my mom passed, I had my boyfriend, my husband now, but he was like my new boyfriend. He kept me busy. He was my support. He made me smile. When my dad passed away, my kids kept me in the now, right? They, especially when they're young like that, they don't understand, they don't really process it. It's like, we still need to be fed, mom. We still need to be loved on, mom. Like, thank God I had them
Yeah.
because they really kept me busy. They were my motivation to take care of myself, to feel my body the way it should be, to make sure that I'm drinking water, to smile. Because even though like I was in so much pain, my baby just made me smile.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And it's this, you're, what you need to do for your children, for your
Mhm.
family, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes we just need something to look at that's outward to keep us going, to put one foot in front of the other, it sounds like, as
Mhm.
well. And I'm so glad you had your therapist as well
Yeah.
already lined up. So
Yeah.
you had that support, you had family, friends, you had all of that support. And then when did you, because I know that you're a functional medicine health coach now,
Mhm.
right? And so, first of all, let's talk about what that actually is for anybody listening,
Right.
somebody who doesn't know what
Yes.
is that. And I'm curious how you got on that path, through your healing journey, and how and what
Mhm.
brought you to becoming that. So first of all, what is a functional medicine health coach?
Yeah, so functional medicine is considered like whole body medicine, and functional medicine practitioners are trained to look at the whole person. And if you go to them, let's just say I'm having symptoms of stomach pains constantly. So they're going to look at what is it in your whole environment, your body, your environment, the food you're eating, the toxins you're exposed to, how you're living. What is it that might be contributing to this problem? Where here in America, we have kind of mainstream medicine. And if I'm having like major stomach issues, I might go to a gastroenterologist, and that doctor is trained in that area specifically. So they're going to treat the symptoms of that problem. And usually they're trained to treat them most often with medication or surgeries. And they're not really in a practice to look at the whole body might be connected. Where functional medicine is, they want to get to the root of it. And the root could be how we're sleeping, like I said, how we're eating, toxins in our environment, our relationships, any trauma that we've been exposed to in our life, even birth stories. Like when I went to my functional medicine doctor for the first time, she wanted to know everything from birth until now. Had I been on antibiotics? Was I bottle fed or breastfed? Was I vaginal delivered or C-section? And I'm like, what? That matters? Yes. All of that matters to our health. So the turning point for me was we've been in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona for about 5 years now. And I was dealing with, I wasn't working at the time when we moved here. I told my husband I wanted to take some time off. And so I was learning a lot about health, reading a lot of books. And one of the books I came across, the doctor said, if your fasting blood sugar is above 90, so fasting means when you wake up and take your blood sugar, if it's above 90, you're on the way to prediabetes. Um, so that was like, okay, I'm going to go out and get a monitor, and I want to see where I'm at, because my dad had type 2 diabetes. So, doctors will say you're more likely to get it because it's in your genes if, your family has it, when really we know that that's not true. Type 2 diabetes is lifestyle related. Anyways, so I took the blood sugar reading and it was very high. So I went to my endocrinologist and I said, I need you to test my A1C. I need to know where that's at. I'm really concerned. My dad had type 2 diabetes. So she tested my A1C. I was 5.6. 5.7 is pre-diabetic. When I asked her, oh my goodness, what can I do? I need to reverse this. I need to get this number down. This is too close to where, too close. And she said, oh, you don't have to worry. You're fine. You're not pre-diabetic yet. Like, you're fine. Just make sure that you continue to eat right and exercise. Well, in my mind, I was eating right and exercising. So I didn't understand why I was almost pre-diabetic. So I just didn't like that answer. I felt like I wasn't getting any help from her. And that's when I finally dove into functional medicine. I paid the out-of-pocket cost because it's not covered by insurance companies, unfortunately, yet. But my dying wish is that one day it will be, and that we'll all have access to that kind of care. And what it boiled down to was my blood sugar. My blood sugar was at the root of a lot of what I was struggling with: my depression, my weight gain, my fatigue, my anxiety. And I completely overhauled my diet. And I know this sounds, wonky, but I was like a new woman. I was just like
Yeah,
a completely different human. I just felt so good in my skin. And that's when I wanted to tell other people about this. And I have always been in the helping profession with social work and counseling. I was in educational counseling. So I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to get certified in functional medicine health coaching and coach other women who might be struggling like I was, get back to the root, get back to the foundations of health so that they are feeling their best and that they are, in optimal health and the best version of themselves for them and for their family.
Yeah, amazing. And that's great. I mean, you and I both talked about Dr. Hyman and how we're both like, we love him so much.
Yeah.
And so tell me, was that something that with your dad's type 2 diabetes and then ultimately his passing, did that propel you into this journey of health? Is that kind
Yeah.
of, do you think that was the
Yeah.
starting point?
It was definitely the starting point because I just took for granted that they would be around. I
Yeah.
just figured, like my dad's family members, like his aunt lived to be 101 or something like that. Like his parents lived to be well into their 80s. And I just assumed that, my parents would live a long time.
Yeah.
And I can't assume that for me. And so the pain that I went through with losing my parents, I don't want my kids to go through that pain.
Yeah.
And so God willing, I mean, I could die in a car accident tomorrow, but what I can control is how I take care of my body. And I do believe both of my parents' health could have been better. Like they could possibly still be here had they taken better care of themselves. So I know that I am responsible for that. And I think that was kind of the wake up call for me. I
Yeah.
can't take for granted that I'm going to be around a long time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so that really was what kind of catapulted me into just learning more about health and taking better care of myself.
Yeah, amazing. And really, I think it's quite interesting what you were saying, because with functional medicine, they look at the whole body. So it's not just
Hmm.
the kale that we're eating or the
Yeah.
sugar that we're eating, like toxic relationships, the
Hmm.
environment, the trauma. So in your studies, did they talk about like trauma on the body, grief in the body, like how it manifests itself, and how in functional medicine, do you care for
Hmm.
that, or do they touch upon that?
So yes, absolutely. Like they do something called the timeline, and the matrix, and how they try to kind of correlate when symptoms come about. So when did this happen for you? So like for me, hypothyroidism, I got hypothyroidism in my 20s. So what happened in between, when you were born till then could have maybe triggered this in you. Was it your diet? Was it, something that happened to you in your youth? Um, just kind of trying to pinpoint it. It's very investigative. So
Yeah.
it takes patience from the patient to go with the process and be like, okay, we are really trying to uncover this and get to the root so we can solve it. Because there's a lot of studies out there, and I'm sure in the work that you do, you've been able to find those studies and research that we can make ourselves sick if we don't release trauma, if we don't heal those feelings of grief. It will come out. Like there's no suppressing it and holding it down. Like it's going to come out some way somehow, so we need to deal with it.
Yes, I
um
mean it's 100% true. And I knew enough because of some of the work that I did in the States around grief, that when I had these losses of my parents and my son-in-law and like all these people passing away, I knew enough of the research that when trauma sits there, because it's like the book, The Body Knows a Score, like
mhm.
it knows. So when anniversary dates come up, even if you're not aware or even thinking about an anniversary date, but then all of a sudden you're sick, or you've got
Yeah.
tension, or you don't feel well, or you just cry for no reason, or your body knows the score, it knows that trauma that is sitting in there. So I knew I needed to get it out as much as possible, and it's a continual process. So I think
Yeah.
for listeners, it's try to find different modalities and things that you recognize that when it's trauma, to how do you release that? How do you get that out of your body
Yeah.
and continue to do so? Because then you're going to get hit again,
Yeah.
and go, okay,
Yeah.
what do I do with that? So I love that it's a holistic, really,
Hmm.
approach to
Yeah.
health.
Yeah. I just started doing breath work with a practitioner. She offers breath work classes. And the first time I did the class, I just was like, whoa. I had no idea I had so much sadness still in me. Like every time I do a breathwork class, I shouldn't say every time, but majority of the time, tears are flowing. And when I journal about it, it really kind of stems from that sadness that I still miss having them here. And so my brother's about to have a baby, and I think like my parents should be here for him. Like the grief is coming up again. Like, even though, so I think a big part of my faith too, and I think what helps me is I do believe they are not physically, spiritually connected to us. I do believe that they are here. I just have so much faith in that. So the fact that it's not like they won't see the baby, they're going to meet the baby. They're probably going to hold the baby before my brother does.
Yep. Yep.
But to have for my brother to navigate parenthood without his mom, like
Yeah.
that I have so much sadness
Yes,
for that, and that's in
absolutely.
me. So, and
Absolutely.
it still comes out, and just, and depending on your childhood and how you were raised, suck it up, don't cry. Like, crying is a sign of weakness. Like, just let the tears, honestly, it's a way that our body is healing, and just releasing that energy and letting it go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're so right. When there's a new thing that happens, like, or something exciting that happens, like a new baby, these
Hmm.
are the things I remember at my mom's funeral. I would say, when anything bad happened, I called my mom. When anything good happened, I called my mom. And this
Yeah.
really bad thing happened, and I couldn't call my mom because the bad thing that happened was she died. And
Yeah.
it's that, oh my God, like, they should physically be here. I mean, there'll be listeners who have different belief systems. You and I have
Hmm.
talked about this. We both are on the same page. I agree with
Right.
you. I know, in sense, and we are connected. Our DNA is
Hmm.
connected, and they are with us. But it's different, isn't it? Because they're not physically here to hold the
Hmm.
babies and to be there. So
Right.
that's why
Yeah.
I think we don't ever get over the loss, because and as the years go on, are you finding, as the time goes on, does it get easier? Is it the same? How does that feel
Yeah.
for you?
I would say that the initial, like my cousin, I remember when my dad died, my cousin sent me an email, and he goes, and he lost his brother. So he said, I just want you to know that the sting gets a little bit easier. Like, as far as
Mm,
the initial pain, like the gut wrenching, like, pain gets easier. Navigating through life without your parents, there's good days and bad days. And especially, when you have friends that still have their parents, I always say, don't take advantage of it. Don't take it for granted. Spend that time with them, be thankful. And I think they forget too, right? Until they hear me say, I don't have my parents like you do. Um, I almost lost my father-in-law to COVID a couple years ago, or was it last year? It was, I don't know, but it was awful. And he's been my dad since my dad passed away. So my dad's been gone 10 years now.
mm,
So he's been my dad, and I love him so much. And so when he almost passed away, I was like, I was on my knees praying to God and to my dad, saying, he can't go yet.
yeah.
Please don't take him yet. He can't go yet. I need him here. And thank the Lord, he was saved, and
Mm,
he's still here. And my sister-in-law doesn't like car rides. And my father-in-law is probably like the just the most like tense driver, annoyed at everyone on the road. And I said, come visit me. It's like a 4-hour drive from where they live. I'm like, come visit me. She goes, oh my gosh, I can't be in the car with him. You know how horrible. And I said, you know what? Your dad almost died last year. Just be grateful that you have him to drive you to Arizona and bitch the whole way there.
Exactly.
And it was, I think that for her, she was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Okay, sorry. And she came.
Yeah, exactly. It's
It's
all
just
it's perspective.
changing the
Absolutely.
perspective. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they drive you nuts. It's your dad. He's going to drive you nuts. But just that he's here is such a blessing to
It's
be able
so
to.
true. It's such a great message because I don't know how many times I rolled my eyes at my parent, like, oh my God, like,
Mhm,
and they'd come here to the UK and stay for like 2 months. And I'd say to my girls who are grown, okay, go see them. I'd be like, oh my God, but obviously I love my parents, but I'm like, oh,
yeah.
you need to go. And then,
Yeah.
but I have the same message as you. Now it's like, oh dear. Yeah. Right. Not
Mhm,
out of guilt or whatever, because I'm sure I know I drive my kids crazy, but
yeah.
yeah, no, it's such an important message that, especially for those who have a great relationship with their parents, and
Mhm,
even if they annoy them, is to spend that time. And I appreciate the part of the sting, because the
mhm,
physical sickness that you had
mhm.
obviously subsided as time went
Yes.
on, but we never get over it. Doesn't get easier. People don't, I think we're so grief illiterate at times that message, I think, is really important to not to say, because like
Yeah.
you said, it's been 10 years and still, obviously you miss your dad, you
Yeah.
miss your mom, and it's just
Yeah.
not the same. And I think as the years go on, sometimes it's almost harder in a sense, because it's that
Mhm.
much more time that you haven't seen, touched, heard, and your children are growing, and and
Yeah.
yeah, I imagine that is
Yeah.
painful. It is good
Yeah.
times, bad times.
Well, and what I tell my friends who do lose their parents, is that keeping them alive by talking about them. Like, I have pictures in the house. I talk about my parents all the time. So I always say Grandma Debbie, or, grandpa, because my father-in-law's papa. So I always say grandpa.
Yep.
And my son was so little he doesn't remember. My daughter was 3, and she spent a lot of time with my dad, but I do still think she doesn't remember. Like, she remembered then, but now that so much time has passed, she sees pictures. She has an emotional connection to him, but the memories, I think, are very, very faint. But
Yes.
because I talk about it all the time, I created books, like picture books with my daughter and my dad. I always say, like, we joke about my mom because she was so silly and would say funny things. And I was like, oh, that's what like, I'll say it. I'll say, that's what Grandma Debbie would say, just keeping them alive. And
So true.
that is so healing for me to talk about them, because I do feel like it keeps them here
It's
in
so
our
true.
life.
It's such a good point, Jane, because that is one of the things I think that we need to give that message out to people, is that we want to tell stories about
Hmm.
our loved ones. They still live within us, and we want to share, and we want to talk about them. And that is the way to keep the memory alive. But that is so healing too.
Hmm.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
amazing, amazing that you do that with your kids. I love that. I love that legacy. And that
Yeah.
just teaches them that they do the same. They're learning something so powerful, and
Hmm.
also in grief and death,
Hmm.
and that we still talk about the ones who have passed on.
Yeah.
What a great
Yeah.
lesson.
And I wasn't, I didn't mask the pain either. Like, they saw me cry. They still see me cry,
Yep.
when it comes to that. So I think that's another thing too, is to not be embarrassed by the tears, and to be comfortable to just cry and let it out,
Absolutely.
because it is so healing. And everyone's journey with grief is different. They grieve differently. Like, some people aren't criers. Like, I for me, that's very healing to be able to cry. Um, so as long as the feelings are released in some way. And that's why I love breath work. I stumbled across it last year and I thought, where has this been? Like,
Yeah.
it is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
I
I
mean, I
honestly,
love the
yeah.
modalities that you've used,
Hmm.
in the healing, and like you said, not holding back, and when it comes, it just comes, and it's so hard to hold it back anyway when it comes, isn't it? It's so
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it's amazing work. And in the show notes, I'm going to put how people can find you. But why don't you tell us? Someone's listening, going, "Oh my God, I need to connect with Jenny." So tell us, where can people find you, your website, and then, like I said, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, my website, simplifiedlifestylecoaching.com, but I'm most active on Instagram, and you can
Okay.
find me there, Jenny, JENNYAZ_coach. So I am a health coach, and I help women, frustrated women over 40, transform their health by teaching them a simple approach to weight loss. So simple is short. It's an acronym that I came up with for sleep, intermittent fasting, meal prepping, prioritizing protein, lifting weights, and exhaling, which is releasing the stress.
Wonderful. I love that acronym.
Yeah, it's just so overwhelming, right? Like, oh my gosh, I got to go keto. I have to go paleo. I have to do low carb. I have to do like all the things that can be so overwhelming. So it really is going back to the basics, and sleep, stress, how we move our body, how we feed our body is is all there is, and how our overall health is. So it really is going back to like the simple basics.
Yeah, and I love that you've used that word as an acronym.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, perfect. Well, I'll put the details in the show notes, but I'm so grateful that you came on and shared your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me and inviting me.
Absolutely.